In the remote woods of Pine Hollow, darkness hides more than just shadows. When Emily returns to her hometown to uncover the truth behind her family's mysterious past, she quickly realizes some secrets refuse to stay buried. Strange whispers echo through the trees, and unseen eyes watch her every move. What ancient curse lingers beneath the surface, and what price will she pay to unravel it? Brace yourself for a tale where fear is more than just a feeling. It's a deadly reality waiting to consume anyone who dares to dig too deep. They say the forest behind the old Mercer property never grew back right. The fire that gutted the house in 1979 burned more than timber. It seared its memory into the soil. Locals said the trees that came back were too thin, too straight, like they were standing at attention for something you couldn't see. The ash never fully washed away. Neither did the smell. Even now, 4 decades later, on certain wet mornings when the fog hugged the hills of Hollow's End, it crept back, smoke, and something else. Something sweet, like burned flowers. Claire Duval had no intention of stepping near that land again. But grief has a way of dulling logic, and family has a way of dragging the past back with it. She stood by the rusted mailbox marked Mercer, her boots sunk ankle-deep into thawing mud, wind biting through the fleece of her jacket. A black rental car idled behind her on the shoulder of Millstone Road, windows fogged. Inside it, Marcus, her younger brother, tapped his phone with nervous energy, glancing up only once to catch her eye through the windshield. Claire tightened her grip on the manila folder in her hand. It was thick, warped slightly by dampness, and sealed with a red ribbon their mother had tied around it before her death 3 weeks ago. The letter inside was short, handwritten. The ink smudged in places where her mother's hands must have trembled. Claire had read it too many times already. Do not let them tear it down. Someone must go back. The ground still remembers. The Mercer blood still owes. She thought her mother was raving, grief-stricken perhaps, or just old. But then the lawyer arrived explaining the strange inheritance. The deed to the Mercer house is back in your family's name, he said. As per your mother's request, it is to be reclaimed, not sold. There's a trust set up to restore it. Restore what? Claire had wondered. There's nothing left but scorched beams and hollow stone. And yet, here she was. She turned back to Marcus and motioned with her head. Come on, she said. I Googled it, he muttered as they walked the uneven trail leading up toward the charred clearing. No one's lived here since the fire. The official report said it was accidental, faulty wiring, but Reddit has other ideas. Claire didn't answer. I'm serious, he continued. One guy said the Mercer family wasn't just rich, they were weird. Like secret room and blood rituals weird. He said your great-uncle Asa used to take in orphans and... Stop, Claire's voice cracked, sharper than she meant. They broke through the trees into the clearing, and for a moment neither spoke. Time had not been kind to the Mercer house. Blackened stone columns stood like rotten teeth, forming the bones of the old estate. A shallow foundation caved inward at the center, overrun by weeds and snowmelt. But stranger still were the circles. 6 of them, cut into the earth, perfect, symmetrical, bare of any vegetation, each the size of a small table, filled with dark mulch, and something that shimmered faintly under the morning light. Marcus stepped toward one. Claire grabbed his arm. No, she whispered. You see that right? Var, he said. Those weren't in any photos online. They weren't. She remembered the place differently. It looks different. She had only been 6 when the fire happened, but certain images stuck. Her grandmother humming as she crushed herbs in a copper bowl, the row of dolls on the mantel, each with a tag around its neck, and the staircase, twisting, creaking, that led to nowhere. Something else rose in her memory now, something that had hidden beneath the haze of childhood. Her grandmother's voice, low and urgent. If the 6th ring blooms red, close your eyes and do not speak. Claire, Marcus called, you okay? She didn't answer. Her eyes had locked on a shape half buried beneath the snow near the largest circle. She moved closer and knelt, brushing aside the slush. It was a mask. Worn leather, human-shaped but distorted. No mouth, just 2 holes where eyes should be. Threaded along the edge in silver stitching were letters in Latin. Domos recluditor per memoriam. The house opens through memory, she whispered. What is that? Marcus asked, squatting beside her. I don't know, Claire lied. But she did, or part of her did. It was like finding the end of a thread buried in her bones. She rose slowly. We're not leaving. What do you mean? I mean we're staying, just for tonight. If we're going to fix this, if we're going to honor what Mom wanted, then we have to start now. Marcus stared at her. Claire, this place is cursed. Good, she said. Maybe that means we can break it. They spent the next hour pitching the tent. Claire had insisted they bring gear. Marcus argued that no one camped in the Appalachian woods in late October, but relented when he saw how serious she was. Once the tent was up, they laid out maps, solar lanterns, and the battered journal Claire had pulled from their mother's attic. Inside were pressed flowers, recipes, and short notations. Some crossed out, others circled in red. The last few pages were blank except for a crude drawing of 6 rings and the word return scrawled underneath. As night fell, the cold came quick. They ate canned stew in silence, the air around them thick with pine and something sharper, like copper. From the edge of the clearing just beyond the tree line came the occasional crack of branches. No animals showed themselves. No wind stirred. Claire didn't sleep. She lay awake long after Marcus's breathing slowed, the lantern's dim pulse casting shadows that danced along the canvas walls. At some point, she heard the humming. Low, female, familiar. Her mother's voice? No. She crawled from the tent, breath fogging instantly. The fire pit had gone out, but the 6 circles glowed faintly, pulsing like coals under ash. And in the center of the largest ring stood a figure. Tall, thin, head tilted. It wore the mask. Claire couldn't move. Her limbs locked. She tried to speak, to scream, but the air left her in silence. The figure raised one hand, and then it pointed directly at her. Claire couldn't breathe. The figure stood motionless in the circle, its mask catching the moonlight like pale bone, the silver stitching shimmering faintly as though alive. The trees behind it seemed to lean in, as if nature itself recoiled or observed. It didn't step closer. It didn't speak. It only pointed. And then, without warning, it lowered its hand and slowly vanished into the dark. Not walked, not turned. It simply faded, like mist. Claire stumbled backward, boots slipping in the wet grass. Her pulse drummed in her ears, hot and erratic. She grabbed for her flashlight, but the beam flickered weakly before dying completely. The backup lantern inside the tent was still aglow, dull amber against the night. She turned and ran. Marcus sat up groggily when she zipped through the flap. Jesus, what? Is someone here? Her voice came in a whisper but carried weight. What do you mean, in the circle? She grabbed the journal, flipping past drawings and pressed herbs. I saw it. A figure, masked. It pointed at me and just disappeared. Marcus stared, his expression crumpling between fear and disbelief. Claire, it's freezing. You didn't imagine it. She held up her hand. It was trembling uncontrollably. Did I imagine that? My body won't stop shaking. He stood, pulling on his coat. We're leaving. Now. I don't care about Mom's letter. I don't care about this freak show. I'm done. Claire didn't answer. Her eyes locked onto a new entry in the journal, one she hadn't noticed before. On the inside back cover, faintly written in what looked like pencil, was a single sentence. The circle calls the blood. She reached for her backpack, pulled out the manila folder again, and removed the deed. Marcus froze. Claire. There, stamped beside their names on the legal document, was a seal neither of them remembered seeing before. A black wax imprint. A stylized tree with 7 branches, roots wrapped into a spiral. It wasn't there before, Claire murmured. Marcus looked ill. Let's go. Please. But something gnawed at Claire now, some recognition under the surface of reason. That tree. She had seen it somewhere, years ago, on a pendant their grandmother used to wear, carved into the wood above the fireplace, even etched faintly into the stone gate that once marked the front of the Mercer property. It wasn't just a symbol, it was a crest, a family mark. Claire stepped outside again. The forest had gone utterly silent. No wind, no rustle, just the rhythmic drip of melted snow sliding from branch to mud. Then, snap, a branch broke somewhere in the tree line to her left. She turned her head slowly. Nothing. Claire, Marcus hissed from behind her. Don't, please. She moved forward anyway. Each step took her closer to the center ring, the one that had glowed. The soil inside looked freshly churned, almost warm. She reached its edge and knelt again. From the earth, barely visible beneath the top layer of loam, was something white. She scraped at it. Not stone, not wood, bone, human. Her breath caught in her chest. She clawed at the dirt with shaking fingers until more became visible. A jawbone, cracked and brittle, and then to the left of it, a single silver button. Claire! Marcus's shout was cut short. She turned, heart lurching, but he was already gone. No sound, no scream, no struggle, just gone. The trees stood still, the clearing silent. Panic surged. Claire spun wildly, calling his name. Marcus! Nothing. She grabbed the flashlight again and swept the beam across the clearing. It sputtered, coughed into light. Then she saw it. Drag marks. Fresh, cutting through the grass like something had been pulled. She followed them into the woods. Branches clawed at her jacket, tore at her skin, but she pushed forward, calling his name again and again until the wind seemed to echo it back, distorted. Marcus! Marcus! Then a light, up ahead, flickering. She broke into a run and found herself stumbling into a clearing she did not recognize, but something told her she'd been here before. Maybe not in this life, maybe not entirely in her own memory, but it felt familial. The light came from a window, yes, a window, because now, impossibly, in the center of the woods stood a house, not a ruin, a house, whole, clean, lit from within by firelight. Her grandmother's house, the Mercer house, before the fire. She stepped forward, trembling. Inside, she could see movement, shadows passing by curtained glass. The smell of sage and burning herbs filled the air. A wind chime jingled softly from the porch. Her breath fogged again as she reached for the door. It opened on its own. The hallway beyond was lined with dark wood and candle sconces. Portraits hung on the walls, faces half turned, gazes blank or missing entirely. Claire moved slowly, the floorboards creaking beneath her. A familiar staircase curved upward to the left. Marcus? She called. A figure appeared at the top of the stairs. Not Marcus. It was a woman in a gray dress, eyes black as obsidian, mouth stitched shut with red thread. She raised one hand and pointed downward. Claire backed away, but something thumped behind her. She turned. Marcus lay on the floor, unconscious, pale, a line of dried blood at his temple. She dropped beside him. Marcus, wake up! He stirred, groaned, and then the house shook. The walls trembled. A roar, deep, inhuman, sounded from the foundation. Claire looked up. The ceiling above the staircase had begun to bleed. A thin line at first, then a torrent, black and viscous, pouring in a spiral down the steps like tar. The woman had vanished. Only her mask remained, perched on the banister. Claire grabbed Marcus and pulled him to his feet. They stumbled toward the front door, but it was gone. No knob, no seam, just wood and wall. Trapped. And then the portraits began to whisper, not with voices, but with breath, as if the faces inside were alive, watching, waiting. One frame cracked, then another. A whisper louder than the others. You returned, so we begin again. And somewhere beneath the floorboards, something knocked. Once, twice. Then, from deep below, a third knock, and the sound of chains unwinding. Some knocks are just sounds, others are invitations. Marcus coughed violently, slumping forward as Claire held him up, her hands sticky with cold sweat and blood. The air in the house was changing, pressurized, like something immense had awoken just beneath the floor. The whispering had stopped, but the silence was worse. The portraits along the walls were no longer whispering, but their expressions had shifted subtly, mouths curled upward in mockery. Eyes now followed their every movement. One frame on the far end of the hall had cracked down the center, and through it, black liquid oozed like sap from a tree. Claire pulled Marcus into the corner beneath the staircase, her mind racing. "You okay?" His lips moved, but his voice was a rasp. "What the hell is this?" She didn't answer, because how could she? The Mercer house had burned down 20 years ago. She remembered the smoldering ruins, the blackened beams, and the ash that had blown for days. And yet, here it stood, whole, breathing, hostile. Something about the knocks, once, twice, then the third, that pattern. It wasn't random. It was a calling card. Her grandmother used to do the same knock every night before entering Claire's childhood bedroom. 1, 2, pause, 3. Claire had thought it was just habit, but now she wasn't so sure. She rose, steadying Marcus. "We have to move. We can't stay here." He nodded, face pale but determined. "The window." They hobbled toward the nearest window, but the glass was warped, thicker than any pane should be, rippling like liquid amber. Claire struck it with her flashlight. The beam bounced off like rubber. No crack, no dent. "We're not breaking out of here." Marcus clenched his fists. "Then we find another way." They pressed forward down the hall. The lights above flickered, candle sconces mounted in antique brackets, casting shadows that moved against the grain of the flame. As they passed one closed door after another, each one bore a name etched into the wood in faint gold letters. Claire paused at one, Elatis, her grandmother's name. The door was ajar. Inside, the room was drenched in twilight, dustless, untouched. A small bed made with crisp linen. An old phonograph sat in the corner, spinning slowly with no record on its plate. A braided rug covered most of the floor, its pattern circular, with 7 concentric rings stitched in faded crimson thread. In the center of the rug sat a mirror, freestanding and tall. Claire stepped closer. Her reflection stared back, but the room behind her was different. It showed Eloise's room, yes, but older, rotting wallpaper, the bed decayed, the rug stained and curling at the edges. And her reflection? Her eyes weren't hers. They were black, wide, unblinking. She turned away. "This place is wrong." Marcus leaned on the doorframe. What was she doing here? Claire glanced back at the mirror one last time. The reflection was gone. Just an empty room now. They continued, door after door, each one now marked not just by names, but dates, birth and death etched beneath. One read, Charlotte A. Mercer, born 1891, died 1914. Another Gideon Mercer, born 1856, died 1901. Generations, whole branches of the family, each room a tomb. But when Claire reached the final door at the end of the hall, there was no name, only a symbol carved into the wood. The tree with 7 branches, and below it, a handprint, scorched into the surface, black, human-sized. Claire didn't touch it. The doorknob turned on its own. The door creaked open into pitch blackness. A gust of wind, cold and earthy, breathed out from the void beyond. Marcus pulled her back. "We're not going in there." Claire shook her head. "We might not have a choice." The house moaned. Not the wind, not the structure. Something beneath. A creaking like wood but deeper, like flesh stretched over bone. Suddenly, all the candlelights in the hall extinguished simultaneously. Darkness swallowed them. Claire fumbled for the flashlight, clicked it on. The beam flickered and then stabilized. They were no longer in the hallway. The walls were gone. The rooms were gone. They stood inside a circle of trees. Thick, ancient, bark like leather. Above, The sky was not night, it was void. An expanse of gray mist with no stars, no moon, no end. Marcus looked around. "What the hell?" Claire's voice trembled. "This isn't real." But it felt real. Every root, every breeze, they were in a memory, or a dream, or someone else's version of reality. In the center of the grove stood 7 stones, each the height of a man, arranged in a spiral. A ritual site. Claire stepped closer, drawn by something primal. Carved into the first stone was the same symbol, the tree with 7 branches, but this time it moved. The branches swayed, the roots writhed. Marcus recoiled. "It's alive." "No," Claire whispered. "It's awake." Voices rose around them, chanting in a language Claire didn't recognize. Figures appeared at the edge of the grove, tall, hooded, silent. Each wore a mask, sewn shut at the mouth, eyes hollow. One stepped forward and extended a hand to Claire. In its palm lay a pendant, wooden, old, the same crest. Claire took it, and the world fractured. The grove shattered like glass. She blinked, and they were back in the Mercer House hallway, but everything had changed. The walls bled, the floor pulsed, and from every door they emerged, figures in masks, one from each room. Claire screamed. Marcus backed against the wall. The masked figures didn't run, they didn't speak. They simply walked forward, in unison, as if bound by string. Claire reached for the pendant. It burned in her hand. The first figure reached them, lifted its mask, and beneath was... The floorboard creaked under Marcus's boots as he stepped into the hallway beyond the hidden door. The air inside was colder, denser, as if whatever lay ahead hadn't been disturbed in decades. A single bulb flickered overhead, casting long, twitching shadows that danced along the peeling wallpaper. Behind him, Tess hovered near the entrance, phone flashlight held high, her other hand white-knuckling a rusted fire poker she'd grabbed from the hearth. "Marcus," she whispered. "Do you smell that?" He did. It was faint at first, but now unmistakable, a mixture of wet earth, decay, and something acrid, like burning hair. It reminded him of a night long ago on his uncle's farm, when a coyote had gotten tangled in barbed wire and slowly died in the summer heat. "It's coming from down there," he said, nodding toward a narrow staircase leading into the basement. They descended slowly. The steps groaned under their weight, dust fluttering with each movement. At the bottom was a cement floor, slick with moisture and warped with cracks. The flashlight illuminated a series of markings on the walls, symbols etched in charcoal or something darker. They curved and spiraled, converging around what appeared to be an altar made of stacked stones and animal bones. Candles, long since melted down, lined the perimeter. "Oh God," Tess muttered. "Is this some kind of ritual site?" Marcus stepped closer. He didn't answer. Something about the arrangement felt familiar. Not in a direct way, but like he had seen it in dreams, or in the margins of some forgotten folklore. Then he saw the mirror. It stood at the far end of the room, propped against the wall, its surface mottled with dark age spots and cracks. But in the reflection, the room looked different, alive. The candles burned with blue flame. The symbols pulsed like veins. And in the center of it all stood a woman in a veil, unmoving, facing the altar. Marcus reached out, brushing his fingers against the mirror's edge. The temperature dropped instantly, frost blooming across the glass. The woman in the reflection turned her head slowly, revealing a face obscured by dozens of moths crawling across her skin. He yanked his hand back. The frost melted instantly. "Marcus!" Tess said. "You're scaring me." He turned to her, trying to steady his breathing. "It's not just an old ritual site. Someone used this recently." As if on cue, a metallic clatter echoed from above. They both froze. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, moving across the wooden floorboards of the living room above. Tess mouthed, "Not alone." Marcus gestured for her to stay quiet. He crept back up the stairs, Tess just behind. At the top, the house was silent. The living room was unchanged, empty, cold, but something felt off. He looked to the window. The curtain was swaying. He hadn't left it open. A new message was etched into the dust on the window glass, written with a fingertip. "She sees you." Marcus backed away slowly. That's when they heard it. The low humming from the hallway, like a woman's voice caught between laughter and weeping. Tess clutched his arm, her fingers digging into his sleeve. "Let's get out," she whispered. "Now." But as they turned, the mirror at the base of the stairs flickered. A new image, a forest path, moonlit, with a figure crawling along the dirt. It was Marcus, his face torn open, eyes gone, mouth hanging slack. And behind him, her, the woman, still veiled, still smiling. Marcus blinked. The image vanished. He felt nauseous. His vision swam. From the corner of the room came the sound of something dragging cloth or flesh against the floor. Tess was already halfway to the door. He chased after her, shouldering it open. Outside, the cold slapped them like a wet cloth. The wind had picked up. Pine branches swayed violently overhead. As they ran toward the car, the front porch light flickered on by itself. Marcus looked back. A figure stood in the window, face pressed to the glass. The moths had returned, crawling along her skin in lazy swarms. They sped down the gravel road, headlights bouncing off trees as Marcus clenched the steering wheel hard enough to whiten his knuckles. "Who the hell is she?" Tess gasped. "What is this?" Marcus couldn't answer. His mind was a jumble of images. Bones arranged in spirals, moths fluttering in dark hallways. Symbols from books he'd half read in folklore classes years ago. But something deep inside him whispered, "You know. You've always known." Back at the motel, Marcus spread the photos and notes from his research on the bed. Tess paced behind him, still shaken. "She's not a ghost," he said slowly. "She's older than that. Pre-colonial, maybe. Appalachian witch lore. There's an old Cherokee legend about a woman they called Galani, or the Gatherer. Said to come for those who disturb her place. Said to steal their reflection first, then their voice, then stopped." "Then what?" Tess asked, barely above a whisper. "Then they vanish, like they were never born." Tess stared at him. "You think that's what the mirror is?" Marcus nodded. "A conduit, a gateway. She doesn't need to leave her forest. She just needs you to look long enough." Tess sank into the bed, burying her face in her hands. "Do you remember that guy? Jonah, from the Historical Society?" She nodded. "I looked him up again. Turns out, he went missing last winter. Said he was researching the same property. They found his car, but not him. Only thing left was his phone. Guess what the last image was?" Marcus turned his laptop toward her. The photo showed the same altar they'd found. Same mirror. But this time, the figure in the veil was standing closer. Her hand stretched forward, reaching toward the lens. The timestamp on the image, 3:33 a.m. The lights in the motel flickered. Marcus froze. His reflection in the laptop screen began to lag behind his real movements. Just a second, then two, then it smiled before he did. He slammed the laptop shut. Behind them, the bathroom light turned on by itself. The hum returned, closer now. Tess reached for the door. It wouldn't open. Marcus grabbed the mirror above the sink and turned it toward the wall. Too late. In the reflection, the motel room was empty. They were no longer there. Cliffhanger ending, Chapter 2. The motel phone began to ring. Old-fashioned, rotary, ringing again and again. Marcus hesitated, hand trembling. On the fourth ring, he picked it up. From the other end, a voice whispered, not in English, not in any human tongue. Then, just one sentence in a voice he recognized as his own. "You shouldn't have looked." The wind howled through the skeletal branches outside the old Mill Creek Library, carrying with it a bitter chill that seemed to seep into every bone. Marcus stood just inside the heavy oak doors, watching the flicker of his breath in the dim light. The ancient building smelled of damp paper and forgotten secrets, as if the weight of history pressed down on the cracked shelves lining every wall. This wasn't just any library, it was a vault of local legends, the kind whispered by old-timers over whiskey and smoky bars, the kind that never made it into textbooks or news stories. Marcus's fingers traced the spine of a battered volume titled Legends and Lost Rituals of Appalachia. The book felt alive under his touch, brittle pages rustling like the wings of a trapped bird. He flipped it open to a chapter marked with a faded scrap of yellowed paper. The Gatherer of Shadows. The words seemed to blur and sharpen, tugging at the edges of his mind, weaving images he'd fought to suppress. The Gatherer, or Golani as some called her, was said to be a remnant of a time before settlers claimed this land. A spirit of vengeance and sorrow, she preyed on those who dared trespass on her domain, stealing reflections, silencing voices, and dragging souls into the forest depths where no light could reach. Old folklore claimed she wore a veil spun from the wings of moths, her face marked with those strange insects crawling like living tattoos. Marcus swallowed hard. The stories weren't just superstition, they were warnings. He looked up to find Tess watching him, her eyes shadowed with doubt, but burning with determination. "We can't ignore this anymore," she said quietly. "Whatever she is, it's not just legend." Jonah's disappearance, the mirror, the altar, were in over our heads. He nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. The townsfolk called it Mill Creek, but the place felt more like a tomb, its silence thick with unsaid things. Pulling out his phone, Marcus tapped through the photos he'd taken last night. The altar, the mirror, the symbols on the walls. Each one echoed the descriptions from the book. But there was one image that froze him, a close-up of the mirror's cracked surface where the faintest outline of a woman's face could be seen, moths crawling across her skin like dark flames. "It's watching us," Marcus whispered. Tess shivered and wrapped her arms around herself. "Then we need to find a way to stop it." A sudden creak echoed from the back of the library, pulling their attention to the narrow aisle lined with dusty tomes. Shadows lengthened, twisting unnaturally as a cold draft swept through. Marcus's heart hammered in his chest. Something was moving, something unseen. "Stay close," he said, gripping the fire poker he'd taken from the house. Tess nodded, gripping his arm tightly. They moved deeper into the stacks, each step stirring a symphony of whispers that rose and fell like a tide. The whispers were incoherent, a mixture of syllables from old Cherokee tongues and something far darker, broken promises, forgotten curses. Suddenly, the lights flickered and died, plunging them into a suffocating darkness. Their phone flashlights cut through the black like fragile beams of hope. Ahead, a figure emerged, a silhouette shrouded in tattered black robes, its face obscured by a veil of fluttering moths. Marcus froze. The air grew thick, suffocating. The figure raised a hand, revealing long, jagged nails stained dark as dried blood. A low hum began, a chant haunting and ancient, weaving through the library's aisles like a dark incantation. Tess gasped. "Marcus, this is it!" The figure stepped forward, the flutter of moths intensifying, filling the air with a dry, papery rustle. Marcus felt a chill burn down his spine as the veil lifted slightly, revealing hollow eyes that reflected infinite night. A voice, cold as grave soil, whispered in a language Marcus only half understood. His mind reeled as images flashed, twisted trees dripping with blood, faces without eyes screaming silently, and the altar where souls were claimed. Marcus knew this was no ordinary spirit. The Gatherer was bound to this place by a ritual older than any law, older than the mountains themselves. "We have to end this," Marcus said, voice barely audible, but Tess shook her head. "We don't know how." From the shadows, a small leather-bound book appeared at their feet, glowing faintly. Marcus picked it up, fingers trembling. The cover was etched with the same symbols from the altar. Flipping through the pages, he found a ritual described. A desperate attempt to trap the Gatherer back into the mirror, but with a terrible price. The caster must offer a reflection of their own soul. "Do we have a choice?" Tess asked, eyes wide. "No," Marcus said grimly. If we don't act, she'll keep hunting, taking more lives, more souls. Outside, the wind howled louder, rattling the old windows like the forest itself was screaming. Marcus steadied his breath and began preparing. As he chanted the ancient words, the air thickened, the veil of reality thinning like smoke. The moths swirled in a vortex, circling the flickering lights, as if drawn to the power he wielded. The gatherer shrieked, a sound that pierced flesh and bone, and lunged toward him, but Marcus held firm, the ritual binding her back into the cracked mirror. For a moment, silence fell. The oppressive weight lifted, the cold receding like a bad dream. Marcus exhaled shakily. He looked at Tess, a faint hope flickering in their eyes. But as the last word left his lips, the mirror shattered. Glass exploded in 1,000 shards, and in the fragments, Marcus caught a glimpse of his own face, distorted, hollow, disappearing into darkness. The final thing he heard before everything went black was a voice, his own echoing from the abyss. "You should have never come here." When Marcus finally blinked his eyes open, the world was a blurry haze of shadows and cold. The mirror lay shattered on the floor beside him, shards glinting like frozen tears under the weak overhead light. His body ached in ways that words couldn't describe, bone-deep exhaustion. But worse was the lingering chill crawling beneath his skin, as if something inside had been disturbed, something that should never have been touched. Tess was crouched nearby, her face pale, eyes wide with disbelief. "Marcus? Are you okay?" He tried to answer, but his throat felt clogged, words tangled in a thick fog of confusion. The library, once a sanctuary of knowledge, now felt like a tomb, each corner whispering promises of doom. The shattered mirror was supposed to be a seal, a prison for the gatherer's wrath. Yet, as he looked at the jagged fragments, he felt a profound sense of dread. The ritual hadn't ended. It had only shifted. "Did we do it?" Tess asked hesitantly, inching closer to the broken glass. Marcus shook his head slowly. "I don't know. Something feels wrong. The moment the mirror broke, I felt pulled, like a thread unraveling inside me. A sudden breeze swept through the library, colder than before, carrying with it a faint scent of moth wings and decaying leaves. The whispering returned, but this time it was different, more urgent, more desperate, like a warning rather than a threat. "We need to get out," Marcus said, rising shakily to his feet before it finds a way to come through. They hurried toward the exit, but the heavy oak doors groaned shut before they reached them. The shadows in the corners stretched and twisted, taking on forms that defied reality. Eyes, many eyes, blinked open in the darkness, watching, waiting. Tess grabbed Marcus's arm. "Did you hear that?" A low, guttural growl rumbled beneath the floorboards. The very foundation of the library seemed to tremble, as if the earth itself wanted to swallow them whole. From the far end of the room, a figure emerged. No longer the veiled gatherer, but something worse. A warped reflection of the spirit, fragmented and furious, its form flickering like static on an old television. It reached out with elongated fingers tipped in shards of broken glass. Marcus met its gaze, trying to steady his trembling hands. "We have to fight this, now." He remembered the book, the ritual, the price. The cost of binding the gatherer was never meant to be a simple spell. It was a gamble of souls, a sacrifice etched into the blood and bones of the land. Pulling Tess close, Marcus whispered, "The ritual, it needs a reflection, someone to stay behind." Tess's eyes widened, a silent plea and terror mingling in their depths. Marcus, no. But he had made his decision. The air thickened around them, and the fractured spirit lunged forward with a scream that rattled the glass and shook their bones. Marcus stepped between Tess and the apparition, arms outstretched, voice steadying with purpose. "I will be your reflection." The room pulsed with raw energy as Marcus began to chant the incantation from the book. Words long dead were breathed back into the air, stirring dust in ancient power. The figure writhed, moths flaring from its body like black flames, shrieking in agony and fury. Tess cried out, but Marcus held fast. The ground beneath them cracked, and shards of glass rose like jagged teeth from the floor, encasing Marcus in a cage of light and shadow. As the last syllable escaped his lips, the spirit screamed, a sound so primal and piercing it seemed to tear the fabric of reality itself. Then, silence. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then Tess saw it. The figure trapped inside the glass cage. Marcus's face twisted in pain, eyes pleading with her. The library walls shimmered and warped as the entity's form slowly dissolved, absorbed into the glass prison. Tess fell to her knees, breathless, tears streaming. Marcus. But as she reached out, the cage cracked. Just a thin line at first, like a spider web threading across the glass. Then it spidered, jagged and relentless, spreading faster than she could follow. The shattered prison broke apart, shards scattering like deadly rain. Marcus's form flickered, then vanished. A cold laugh echoed through the library, a voice that was not his, but carried his tones, twisted, hollow, and merciless. You cannot contain what lives in the shadows. Tess scrambled back as the darkness surged forward, swallowing the space where Marcus had been. The walls seemed to breathe, pulsing with a malevolent life. Outside, the wind slammed against the windows as if the storm itself was alive, raging to tear the world apart. And in the broken mirror shards, Tess saw a final, terrifying reflection. Not Marcus, but something else. A grin carved from moth wings, eyes burning with unholy light. The gatherer was free. The first sign was the silence. Not the quiet of a calm night, but a suffocating, unnatural hush that seemed to press down on the town of Pine Hollow like a weight. No crickets chirped, no wind whispered through the pines, and even the river's usual murmur was muted, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. Sheriff Ellen Cross stood on the porch of the old county courthouse, eyes narrowing against the creeping fog rolling off the hills. She could feel it. Something wrong, something lurking just beyond the edge of perception. Pine Hollow had always been a town wrapped in shadows, with its creaking wooden houses and winding dirt roads. But this was different. This was a silence that screamed. Her deputy, young Jack Reynolds, approached hesitantly, the crunch of his boots on gravel breaking the eerie stillness. Sheriff, the calls started coming in just after midnight, folks reporting strange lights near the old McAllister farm, and some say they heard chanting. Ellen's jaw tightened. The McAllister place was more than just a farm. Abandoned for decades, it sat like a scar on the outskirts of town, shrouded in local legends about disappearances and strange rituals. Most townsfolk avoided it, but now something had stirred there, something old and hungry. Gather the team, Ellen ordered, her voice low but firm. We're heading out. As the patrol car's headlights pierced the fog, Ellen's mind drifted back to the stories she'd heard as a child, whispers of curses tied to that land. Rituals passed down by those who once lived here, the kind of dark dealings that made grown men shudder, the kind of darkness that didn't just vanish with time. They reached the farm as the moon slipped behind thick clouds, casting the landscape into a near-eternal blackness. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and something else, something metallic and bitter. The farmhouse loomed ahead, its windows shattered, walls draped in vines like claws reaching for prey. Around it, the field stretched wide, barren and broken, the soil turned upside down as if something had clawed its way out. Ellen stepped out, flashlight cutting through the night. Stay close. Keep your eyes sharp. As they moved closer, the ground beneath their feet changed. It was no longer the firm dirt of a farm, but a sticky, dark mud that clung to their boots, pulling at them like unseen hands. The air thrummed with a pulse, a low beat that vibrated in Ellen's chest. Near the barn, they found a circle etched into the soil, deep, precise, and ancient. Symbols and runes, half buried but unmistakably deliberate. In the center, blackened remnants of a fire smoldered faintly, and scattered bones, bleached white and gnawed. Ritual site, Jack muttered, eyes wide. This isn't just folklore. Ellen's gut twisted. The stories were true. Whatever had been buried here wasn't resting easy. Suddenly, a sharp cry shattered the silence, a woman's scream, raw and desperate, echoing from the woods beyond the fields. Without hesitation, Ellen motioned for the team to follow. The trees closed around them quickly, branches clawing at their faces, roots threatening to trip them at every step. The deeper they went, the heavier the air became, thick with a scent like rot and ancient wood smoke. They reached a clearing where the scream had come from, only to find it empty, save for a lone figure curled on the ground, rocking back and forth. "Hey, it's okay," Ellen called softly as they approached. The woman looked up, eyes wide and wild, lips trembling. I didn't mean to." It started again, the voices. The woman's name was Marla, a local school teacher who had lived in Pine Hollow her entire life. She spoke in broken breaths of shadowy figures stalking the town, of whispers that clawed into her mind at night, of an ancient presence awakening beneath the soil, hungry and unforgiving. Ellen kept her voice steady, despite the chill crawling down her spine. "We're going to figure this out. You're safe with us." But even as she said it, Ellen knew the truth was far from simple. The past was bleeding into the present, and Pine Hollow was caught in its grip. That night, back at the sheriff's office, Ellen sat alone under the flickering fluorescent light. The ritual circle's image burned into her mind. She pulled open an old book, a local history tome that spoke in hushed tones of the McAllister family's dark legacy. According to the records, decades ago, the McAllisters had been accused of witchcraft and dark rites, tied to a cult that worshipped a being they called the Hollow One. Legend had it that this entity fed on fear and chaos, trapped beneath the earth by a binding ritual involving mirrors and blood. Ellen's eyes narrowed as she pieced it together. The broken mirror from the library, Marcus's sacrifice. It was part of that ancient chain. The Gatherer was not just a wandering spirit. It was the Hollow One itself, or at least a fragment of it, released once again. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from Tess. "Something's wrong. The shadows are moving again. I don't think Marcus is gone." The line went dead before she could reply. Ellen stared into the darkness beyond the window, the weight of the town's curse settling on her shoulders. The ritual was unraveling, the darkness spreading, and with Marcus gone, the last hope to contain the evil was slipping away. Outside, the wind howled through the skeletal trees, carrying with it a whisper, a promise, and a threat intertwined. Pine Hollow was waking up, and the Hollow One was hungry. The morning light did little to lift the weight pressing down on Pine Hollow. Sheriff Ellen Cross moved through the streets with a sense of urgency, sharpened by the horrors she'd glimpsed the night before. The whispers of the Hollow One weren't confined to the woods anymore. They had begun to seep into every corner of the town, infecting minds and unraveling sanity. Her first stop was the local church, a weathered stone building perched on a hill overlooking the town, like a silent sentinel. Inside, Reverend Matthews, a man whose faith had kept the community tethered for decades, waited with a furrowed brow and hands clenched tightly around the pew. "You called it dawn?" Ellen said, her voice rough with exhaustion. Reverend Matthews nodded. "The darkness grows, Ellen. The old rituals meant to hold it back are breaking down. I fear we are running out of time." He reached beneath the altar and produced a worn leather-bound book, its pages yellowed and fragile. "This contains the rites of binding used by our ancestors, passed down from the native tribes that once inhabited these lands, the rituals that kept the Hollow One trapped." Ellen took the book carefully, feeling the weight of generations resting in her hands. If the Gatherer is a fragment of that ancient evil, then the broken mirror from the library, Marcus's sacrifice, it's all connected. The Reverend's eyes darkened. "Yes, and now that chain is fractured, the shadow moves freely, feeding on fear and chaos." Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden pounding at the door. Deputy Jack burst in, breathless and pale. "Sheriff, there's been another incident. At the Miller farm, Ellen's heart sank. The Millers lived on the edge of town, their land bordering the forest where the McAllister farm lay abandoned. "Let's go." They drove through the mist-shrouded roads, the town slipping behind them as the forest closed in on all sides. The Miller farm was silent when they arrived, the front door hanging open like a scream frozen in time. Inside, the scene was grim. Furniture overturned, walls scratched with jagged symbols, and the unmistakable stench of decay filled the air. In the center of the living room lay the body of Tom Miller, his eyes wide with terror, his skin pale and clamped. Nearby, his wife Sarah sat trembling on the floor, clutching their young daughter Emily, who was eerily silent, her wide eyes fixed on something unseen. Ellen crouched beside Sarah, trying to calm her trembling voice. "What happened here?" Sarah's gaze flickered to the corner, where a thin shadow seemed to pulse and shift. "It came for him, the thing in the dark. It's hunting us all." Emily's voice broke the silence, soft, chilling. "It's hungry." The sheriff's blood ran cold. The presence they'd been chasing was no longer content to lurk in shadows. It was hunting families, seeping into homes, tearing apart the fragile peace of Pine Hollow. Back at the sheriff's office, Ellen pored over the ancient book with Reverend Matthews and Jack. The rites described were intricate, demanding sacrifices and symbols to contain the Hollow One's essence. But as she read, a terrifying realization sank in. The binding ritual was meant to be renewed every generation, an unbroken chain of guardians to keep the darkness at bay. "We missed the last renewal," Matthews whispered. "That's why the curse is unraveling now." Ellen clenched her fists. The weight of responsibility was suffocating. She thought of Marcus, his sacrifice in the library, the shattered mirror, the broken chain. Suddenly the office lights flickered, plunging them into momentary darkness. When the glow returned, an unearthly chill filled the room. From the shadows, a figure stepped forward, a woman, pale and ethereal, with eyes like deep wells of sorrow and fury. "I am Lila," she said, voice echoing like a distant storm, "guardian of the binding. And you, Sheriff, are the last hope." Ellen's breath caught. "Who are you? How?" Before she could finish, Lila extended a trembling hand, revealing a delicate silver locket etched with the same runes from the McAllister Farms ritual circle. "The Hollow One grows stronger with each broken link. You must perform the rite of renewal, but beware, the price is more than blood." Ellen's mind raced. She was no priestess, no witch. She was a sheriff, a protector of law and order, not a bearer of ancient curses. Yet, as the weight of Pine Hollow's fate settled on her, she knew there was no turning back. That night, as fog curled around the town like a living thing, Ellen prepared for the ritual. The town's few remaining believers gathered quietly in the clearing near the McAllister farm, their faces pale but determined. Candles flickered in the darkness, their light a fragile shield against the encroaching void. Ellen held the silver locket tightly, the cold metal biting into her palm. She began to recite the words from the ancient tome, her voice steady despite the dread pooling in her stomach. The ground beneath them trembled. Shadows twisted and writhed like serpents reaching out to snatch the light from their candles. Suddenly, a scream tore through the night. Sarah Miller, clutching Emily, had vanished into the blackness. Panic erupted. Ellen turned to chase, but a force slammed into her, throwing her to the cold earth. The last thing she saw was the gathering darkness, swirling and hungry. And then, silence. The sky over Pine Hollow was a bruised purple, the sun barely a distant memory behind thick, swirling clouds that seemed to press down on the town with oppressive weight. The air was thick with a choking sense of foreboding, as if the very atmosphere held its breath, waiting for the next dark act to unfold. Sheriff Ellen Cross sat alone in the dim light of her office, her hands wrapped tightly around a mug of cold coffee. The weight of what had transpired over the last few days settled deep in her bones. The failed ritual, the disappearances, the relentless creep of darkness. Everything had been building toward this moment. A knock on the door shattered the silence. Deputy Jack entered, his face pale and eyes haunted. "Sheriff, you need to see this," he said, holding out his phone. The screen showed a grainy video, shot from the shaky hand of an unseen observer. Ellen's eyes narrowed as the footage played. A figure, tall, shadowy, and impossibly thin, moved between the trees at the edge of the McAllister farm. Its movements were jerky, unnatural, like a puppet struggling against its strings. The creature paused, turning its head slowly, revealing eyes that glowed faintly with an unholy light. "This thing," Jack whispered. "It's not just a shadow, it's something else. Something hungry." Ellen felt a cold shiver crawl down her spine. The Hollow One had evolved, or perhaps revealed its true form. Whatever it was no longer content to remain hidden in the dark. She rose from her chair, determination hardening her features. "Gather the team. We're going back to the farm. Tonight, we end this." Outside, the town was eerily quiet. Windows were shuttered, streets empty. The usual sounds of crickets and rustling leaves were drowned by an unsettling stillness. As Ellen and her small group approached the farm, the air grew colder, the shadows deeper. The farmstead was in ruins. The once sturdy barn lay collapsed, splintered wood scattered across the ground like broken bones. The fields, overgrown with weeds and wildflowers, swayed as a wind whispered secrets through the night. Ellen's flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing strange symbols etched into the soil, circles intertwined with runes, and strange markings that pulsed faintly with an unnatural light. "Ritual remnants," whispered Father Matthews, clutching his rosary tightly. "They tried to trap it here once, but failed." Suddenly, a guttural growl echoed from the woods, low and menacing. The group froze, breaths visible in the frigid air. From the trees emerged a creature, more defined than the shadows before. Its limbs were elongated, hands tipped with razor claws, and its face a grotesque mask of teeth and hollow eyes. It moved with terrifying speed, launching itself at the group. Chaos erupted. Shots rang out, but the bullets seemed to pass through the creature, as if it were part smoke, part nightmare. Ellen fired desperately, her mind racing to recall the rites. There had to be a way to banish it. "Use the symbols," she shouted. "Seal it where it belongs." The team scrambled, drawing chalk from Father Matthews' satchel and tracing the ancient runes along the ground. The creature hissed, thrashing wildly as the glowing symbols ignited with ethereal fire. In a desperate final act, Ellen stepped forward, clutching the silver locket that had come from Lila, the guardian spirit. She recited the incantation, voice trembling but resolute. The Hollow Ones screamed, a sound that shattered the night and clawed at their sanity. The ground trembled, and for a moment the darkness seemed to fold in on itself. Then, silence. Ellen collapsed to her knees, sweat mingling with tears. The creature was gone, banished back to whatever hell it had come from. But victory was hollow. As she looked around, she saw Emily Miller standing at the edge of the clearing, her eyes empty, lips moving in silent prayer to some unseen god. "Emily?" Ellen called, but the girl didn't respond. Suddenly, Emily's head snapped toward Ellen, and for a fleeting second, her eyes flickered with that same glowing light. The sheriff's blood ran cold. The Hollow One was not defeated. It had found a new vessel. The air hung heavy with a suffocating stillness as Ellen approached Emily, who stood motionless at the edge of the clearing. The faint glow in Emily's eyes flickered, like a dying ember, brief, haunting, and impossible to ignore. It was a sign, a dreadful marker that something had taken root deep inside her. "Emily, listen to me," Ellen said softly, trying to reach the girl she'd known all her life. "You're not alone. We can fight this." But Emily's lips remained sealed, her body stiff as if controlled by an unseen puppeteer. The eerie silence between them was shattered only by the distant howl of wind rushing through the broken branches above. Jack stepped beside Ellen, hand hovering over his holster. "If that thing's in her, what does that mean for her, for us?" Ellen's mind raced. The Hollow One, once just a shadow lurking in the woods, now had a foothold in one of their own. The implications were staggering and terrifying. "We have to get her to the church," Father Matthews said urgently. "The sacred ground might keep it contained." Carefully, they guided Emily away from the farm, the ground seeming to recoil beneath their feet. The forest around them whispered secrets in a language older than time, leaves rustling like sinister laughter. The journey to the church was tense, each shadow threatening to leap out at them. Emily's presence was unsettling, a chill that seeped through their bones. Even the animals of the forest seemed to flee their path. Inside the old stone church, candles flickered against stained glass windows, casting kaleidoscopic patterns on the worn pews. The scent of incense mingled with dust and forgotten prayers. Father Matthews immediately began preparations. Salt lines were drawn around the altar, protective words scrawled hastily on the walls. Ellen and Jack stood watch as the priest approached Emily, placing a trembling hand on her forehead. "By the power of the sacred light, I command the darkness to leave this vessel," Father Matthews intoned, voice echoing in the cavernous space. Emily shuddered violently, body twisting as if caught in an invisible grip. A guttural growl rumbled from deep within her throat, rising in intensity until it threatened to shatter the very windows. The room grew colder, breaths crystallizing in the air as shadows gathered, writhing in unnatural forms along the edges of the sanctuary. The battle for Emily's soul had begun. Suddenly, the door slammed shut, sealing them inside. The flickering candles sputtered, plunging the room into darkness except for the faint glow from Emily's eyes. Ellen gripped Jack's arm. "We're not alone." From the shadows a voice hissed, soft, serpentine, filled with malice. "You cannot hold what you do not understand." The Hollow One had not just possessed Emily, it was manifesting here, in the sacred heart of Pine Hollow. The very ground beneath them trembled, as tendrils of darkness snaked toward the protective wards. Father Matthews chanted louder, sweat streaming down his face. But the creature's power was growing, fueled by the fear and despair radiating from the trapped group. In the midst of the chaos, Emily's eyes locked onto Ellen's. For a fleeting moment, a glimmer of the girl she once was shone through, a desperate plea for help. "Hold on, Emily," Ellen whispered, voice breaking. "We won't let it win." But the Hollow One was relentless. A sudden, piercing scream echoed through the church, shaking the walls. The candles exploded in a burst of fire and shadow, plunging them into complete darkness. When the emergency lights flickered on moments later, Emily was gone. The protective salt lines were shattered, the wards burned away like paper, and in the center of the altar lay a single, blackened feather, soft, cold, and pulsating with dark energy. Ellen dropped to her knees, heart pounding. "It's still here! It's watching!" Outside, the wind carried a new whisper through the trees, an ominous promise that the nightmare was far from over. The night air was thick with unease, as if the very woods around Pine Hollow held their breath, waiting. Ellen stood at the edge of the forest, eyes fixed on the blackened feather still clenched in her hand, a cold, pulsing remnant of the Hollow One's presence. Every instinct screamed that the nightmare was far from over. She tightened her grip and took a hesitant step forward, the dry leaves crunching beneath her boots. The shadows twisted in the moonlight, dark shapes lurking just beyond sight, whispering secrets only the cursed could hear. Tonight, the veil between this world and the darkness beyond felt impossibly thin. Inside her mind, memories of Emily's vacant stare haunted her. A girl swallowed whole by something ancient and merciless. Ellen's heart pounded with guilt and determination. She refused to let the Hollow One claim another soul. As she moved deeper into the woods, the trees closed around her like sentinels, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The cold seeped through her jacket, chilling her to the bone. She pulled her coat tighter, willing herself not to look back. The path was barely visible, swallowed by fog creeping low to the ground. A faint glow shimmered in the distance, the old Miller farmstead, long abandoned, and whispered to be the birthplace of the curse that haunted this land. Ellen's steps quickened. This was where it had all begun. If she wanted to end this, she needed answers. The farm stood silent, its decaying barns sagging beneath years of neglect. The windows were shattered, the wood rotting and blackened by fire long ago. Yet beneath the ruin, a dark pulse vibrated, an unnatural heartbeat that sent shivers down her spine. She pulled out the worn notebook Father Matthews had given her, flipping through pages filled with cryptic notes, ancient symbols, and faded photographs of the land's previous victims. The Hollow One's origins were tangled in the blood-soaked history of Pine Hollow, an evil born from greed, betrayal, and dark rituals meant to protect the land, but twisted into a curse. Suddenly, a whisper brushed past her ear, soft and sibilant. "You cannot stop what is already unleashed." Ellen spun around, heart racing, but saw only the restless trees swaying in the cold wind. She swallowed her fear and pressed on, deeper into the darkness. Inside the barn, the air was thick with decay and something else. Something alive. As her flashlight beam cut through the gloom, Ellen's eyes fell on strange markings carved into the walls. Circles intersected by jagged lines. Symbols of binding and banishment. Her breath hitched. This was no ordinary curse. It was a ritual, a trap designed to contain the Hollow One, yet somewhere along the way, the lines had blurred. From the shadows, a low growl rumbled. Ellen's flashlight flickered, then steadied, revealing a twisted figure emerging, a form half human, half shape-shifting nightmare, the Hollow One itself drawn by her presence. Ellen steadied her breath, clutching the crucifix Father Matthews had pressed into her hand. The battle was no longer just for survival, it was for redemption. The creature lunged, shadows wrapping around her like chains, but Ellen fought back, chanting prayers she barely understood. The air crackled with unseen energy, light and dark colliding in a fierce struggle. Suddenly, a searing pain exploded through her arm as the creature's claw raked across her skin. She cried out, but refused to relent. In that moment, the barn doors burst open, flooding the room with moonlight. Jack and Father Matthews rushed in, chanting in unison, their voices weaving a protective barrier. The Hollow One hissed, retreating into the shadows, but not without a final, chilling warning. "This is not the end. The curse lives on. In you." Ellen collapsed, breathless, the weight of the night pressing down. The fight had only just begun. Outside, the first light of dawn struggled through the trees, but in Pine Hollow, some shadows never fade. The dawn's pale light barely pierced the dense canopy as Ellen lay on the cold floor of the barn, her breath shallow, the taste of iron sharp on her tongue. Jack and Father Matthews hovered nearby, their voices still murmuring ancient prayers that wove fragile threads of protection around them. But Ellen's mind was a storm, churning with the creature's last words echoing deep within her soul. "The curse lives on. In you." She tried to rise, but her body betrayed her, weak and trembling. Claw marks on her arm burned fiercely, a searing reminder that the Hollow One's grasp was not so easily broken. She swallowed back a wave of fear and guilt, knowing that even if the creature had fled, its influence was far from over. Outside, the forest seemed eerily silent, as if the very earth was holding its breath in anticipation. The once distant howls and whispers had faded, replaced by an oppressive stillness that gnawed at her sanity. Ellen's thoughts flickered to Emily. The girl's vacant stare, the silence that followed her, the innocence swallowed whole by darkness. What had happened to her? Was there any hope left? And what price had Ellen paid to confront the Hollow One tonight? Father Matthews approached, his eyes heavy with sorrow. "The ritual was incomplete," he said quietly. "The curse is woven deep into the land, into bloodlines. It doesn't end with a single confrontation." Jack nodded grimly. "We need to finish what was started generations ago. Find the source, the original sin that gave birth to this nightmare." Ellen clenched her jaw. The notebook, Father Matthews's cryptic tome, held the key symbols. Stories of betrayal, greed, and forbidden rituals bound to Pine Hollow's soil. But somewhere between the past and present lay a hidden truth, a way to sever the curse, or at least contain it forever. She struggled to her feet, ignoring the ache in her limbs. "We go back to the Miller farm?" she said, voice steady despite the turmoil inside. There's something there we missed." As they stepped outside, the sun began to rise fully, but the woods no longer felt like a refuge. Instead, the shadows lengthened, creeping toward them like hungry fingers. The journey back was silent, each step weighted by the growing realization that this was a fight not just for survival, but for the very soul of Pine Hollow. The deeper they ventured, the more Ellen sensed unseen eyes watching from the darkness, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. When they reached the decrepit farmhouse once again, Ellen noticed a fresh set of footprints leading into the underbrush. Not theirs. Her pulse quickened. Whoever, or whatever, was here with them, the battle was far from over. Inside the farmhouse, dust motes danced in the morning light filtering through cracked windows. The air was stale, heavy with memories and untold secrets. Ellen's eyes caught sight of a hidden trapdoor beneath a threadbare rug. She hesitated, heart pounding, then pulled it open, revealing a narrow stairway descending into darkness. The trio exchanged tense glances, but knew they had no choice. The steps creaked beneath their feet as they descended into the cellar, a damp chamber lined with ancient stones etched with symbols similar to those in the notebook. The air was thick with the scent of earth and decay. At the center of the chamber lay an altar, cracked and stained with time. Surrounding it were remnants of burned candles and dried herbs, a grim testament to rituals performed long ago. Ellen approached the altar cautiously. Her fingers traced the worn carvings, recognizing the signs of binding and sacrifice. Suddenly, a cold breeze swept through the cellar, extinguishing their candles and plunging them into darkness. A whisper echoed through the chamber, chilling and cruel. "You cannot undo what was done." Panic surged through Ellen's veins as the walls seemed to close in, the shadows alive with flickering shapes. The Hollow One's voice taunted them, a sinister promise that this was only the beginning. Jack fumbled for his flashlight, its beam cutting through the gloom to reveal a figure crouched in the corner. Emily. But she was not the girl they remembered. Her eyes were empty voids, her skin pale and taut. A hollow shell animated by the curse itself. Ellen's heart shattered. "Emily," she breathed, reaching out, but the girl's lips twisted into a cruel smile. "You brought this upon us," Emily hissed, voice no longer her own. The chamber trembled as the curse's full weight descended, threatening to swallow them all. Ellen steeled herself, gripping the crucifix tightly. "This ends now," she vowed. But as the darkness surged forward, a new terror took shape. One more terrifying than any before. From the shadows emerged a second figure, cloaked in ragged black, eyes burning with malevolence. "The true master of the curse," Father Matthews whispered, voice trembling. Ellen's breath caught in her throat. The battle for Pine Hollow had reached its darkest hour, and the price of salvation might be more than anyone was willing to pay. Thank you so much for joining me on this chilling journey through the dark and haunted corners of Pine Hollow. I hope the story sent shivers down your spine and kept you on the edge of your seat. If you enjoyed this tale, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you won't miss out on more horror stories just like this. Your support means the world and helps keep these stories alive. Remember, sometimes the scariest monsters aren't the ones lurking in the shadows, but the secrets buried deep within our own history. Stay curious, stay cautious, and most importantly, stay safe out there. Until next time, keep your lights on and your doors locked. Good night and sweet nightmares.